Hey all, welcome to ShareTreck. Happy Saturday to all of you wherever you are. This is a Saturday short segment. However, the presentation is going to be a bit long because our topic is slightly complex and bigger. I didn't want to break it into two parts. So here we are. Another thing I'd like to get out of the way right away is that initially I had promised you I'd have my good friend coming over here. He's an associate professor in a university, and I was planning to have this as an interactive session where we go through this slideshow along with my friend and I ask him questions. And having been a person who has worked in CRISPR, he would have been able to provide us insights into various aspects of this FDA process that we need to know. However, this is the second week in a row that he has not been able to make time for us. So I thought that, since we are a small channel with just 140 subscribers, he probably might be having problems getting permission from the university. So while we are going to make all the efforts possible to increase the number of subscribers in our channel so that we are better able to attract talent from the industry to come and talk to us, we cannot wait until that happens, because if we look at biotech companies, most of the biotech companies, the CRISPR companies that we are looking in our wait list, the watch list, their balance sheet does not have revenue streams. The only ones that have revenue streams are perhaps CRISPR Therapeutics and a couple of other companies. And the revenue stream is either in terms of licensing fee or in terms of big pharma giving them money to work on developing a particular therapy. And further payments are contingent to the success of the FDA approval on those therapies. So with that being the situation, doing a fundamental analysis of CRISPR companies becomes a moot point. And then the next thing we look on to is technical analysis. But technical analysis gives just the 2 or 3 hours price movement probabilities. And that's not good enough. For a proper investment to take place, we need a fundamental analysis of balance sheet, the industry, the economy and everything, and the technical analysis, so that we can handle both the short-term and the long-term aspects of investing in a particular company. When it comes to CRISPR companies, we don't have the fundamentals, and when it comes to technicals, as we have seen in the last 3 or 4 weeks with the volatile market, there is no rhyme or reason for the prices to go up or down. They just go whichever way. So we are literally navigating blind, and it's almost like gambling when investing in CRISPR companies. So I was thinking that if we went through this FDA approval process, we'll be able to add a little more layer of understanding of the risk factors involved in any given company and the extent to which we need to wait in order for monetization of any therapy or product. So having said that, let me get started with the FDA approval process. First, let us start looking at the cost aspect. The reason I'm putting the cost up front is because the cost for developing a drug varies depending on the technology that is being used, depending on the number of participants in trials, depending on whether there's going to be a control group or not, and also depending on the results that come in and the amount of tweaking that is needed to be done in order to get the proper dosage in place and in order to get the proper effect. And there are situations where some drugs fail. So overall, the cost to company for developing a drug involves the failures as well as the successes. And this particular chart out here gives you an idea of how much companies have spent so far in developing each drug. So if you look at this chart, the first one is AstraZeneca, which has spent the maximum amount of money per drug on R&D. That is around $11,790 million. And that is per drug. And they developed 5 drugs. The sample taken in this particular chart is for 5 drugs. And total R&D spending for them from 1997 to 2011 has been $58,955. So if we go down this chart, we will see varying amounts of money being spent by various companies. Like the ones which are most expensive is AstraZeneca, and the ones which have spent the least is Amgen Inc. with $3,692.14. So the cost base is coming from the technical personnel that is being used in the entire FDA process for doing the research and submitting results. the kind of capital equipment that is needed in order to do the trials and the entire FDA approval process to supply data to FDA, the amount of the difficulty to get patients, the kind of disease that they are investigating, how difficult it is to get the patients for the required number of volunteers for the research. All of these things add into the cost. So if we are in a niche area, then the costs are going to be much higher, because it's going to be very difficult to find the volunteers. Again, if we are in a technology like CRISPR, then we need the talented technicians who can do the work and who can reliably produce results. So all of that thing costs money. So it's all entirely variable. So that's why I'm showing this to you upfront. And as we go through the FDA approval chart, step by step into all the processes that are involved in getting an FDA approval, we'll be talking about the work that needs to be done by the biotech company in each of these phases, and there'll be elements of personnel, there'll be elements of capital, and there'll be elements of data processing, elements of gathering sufficient number of volunteers who will participate in the trial. All of those things, you can visualize the numbers in your head and get a general feel of what it's going to cost. And then we can, in subsequent video, we can look at the pipeline of some of our best bets in the CRISPR industry, like CRISPR Therapeutics and Beam and all, and look at their pipeline with our newfound understanding of the FDA approval process, and reevaluate our opinion on those companies. So that's why I'm showing you this particular chart. Now let's go on to the actual FDA process. So we are going to talk about 5 steps that are involved in the FDA approval process. The first one is step 1, discovery. This is a research for a new drug or device. Step 2 is preclinical research. So drugs and devices undergo laboratory and animal testing to answer basic questions about safety. So in case of CRISPR, it would be the CRISPR tool and methodology. Step 3, clinical research. Drugs and devices are tested on people to make sure they are safe and effective. And step 4 is the FDA review. FDA team reviews thoroughly all the submitted data related to the drug or device and make a decision to approve or not to approve. Step 5 is FDA post-market safety monitoring. So FDA post-market safety monitoring consists of all drug and device safety once products are available for use by the public. This could also lead to gathering of further information in terms of effectiveness on various cohort groups, side effects with other drugs, and sometimes FDA may even recall a drug or a therapy after approval. So the whole range of possibilities are there in the post-market safety monitoring. Let's dig a bit deeper into discovery. In discovery, the company develops new insights into a disease process that allows researchers to design a product to stop or reverse the effect of the disease or the syndrome or the ailment. To me, it means that gaining insight, for example, that sickle cell anemia is caused by a genetic defect, and the realization that if the defect was corrected, sickle cell anemia can be cured. So that to me would mean a discovery. Another way of looking at the discovery stage is that sometimes a new technology comes to play, because of which earlier unthought of remedies can now be possible. And one of the best examples I can give you is CRISPR-Cas9 and the subsequent Cas proteins that were discovered, which are even more surgical. So discovery stage is also triggered by invention of new technologies, such as those that provide new ways to target medical products to specific sites within the body or to manipulate genetic material. So that's how I would characterize the discovery phase. In step 3, we have preclinical research, which is basically going to be designed either to be in vitro or in vivo, and the FDA requires that the companies who do preclinical research follow good lab practices, and that's a requirement that has to be fulfilled at this stage. And the objective of doing preclinical research is to look at the therapy or the drug. Once researchers identify a promising therapy for development, they conduct experiments to gather information on the best way to deliver the therapy. here in CRISPR, we do have researchers working on the challenges with delivery mechanism and off-base edits. Those kind of things will form a critical part of the preclinical research study. Other objective is to calibrate dosage and assess potential benefits as well as mechanism of action for the therapy, recording side effects or adverse effects that take place. Sometimes side effects and adverse effects could derail a candidate therapy, and that could be curtains down for that part of the pipeline. So this is an exit point. Researchers are also looking at differences, if any, among different patient groups. So if you look at the entire universe of patients, that is like entire universe of humanity. So you're looking at children, you're looking at adults, you're looking at teenagers, you're looking at very old people. You would look at males separately, females separately, and also there may be people with diabetes or other chronic conditions. So the sample that the researchers would have to pick would have to ensure that it meets the scope of the study in order to be effective for getting the next stage go ahead from FDA. Another consideration in this stage is to monitor and understand the interaction with other drugs, as well as to evaluate the effectiveness of the subject therapy as compared to other therapies. This is another exit point where many candidates from the pipeline can drop off. It's very logical, because if you are developing a therapy which is not as effective as something is already in the market, then there is no point going ahead and developing it, and there is no way FDA would certify it, because why would the FDA want to certify therapies that are inferior to those that are already in the market? So that's the reason why many candidates could drop off at this stage. Next, we have the clinical research stage. And this refers to studies or trials that are done in people. As the developers design the clinical study, they will consider what they want to accomplish for each of the different clinical research phases and begin the investigational new drug process, the IND process that we have heard so often, a process that they must go through before clinical research begins. Current federal law requires that a drug be the subject of an approved marketing application before it is transported or distributed across state lines, because a sponsor will probably want to ship the investigational drug to clinical investigators in many sites. It must seek an exemption from that legal requirement. The IND is the means through which the sponsor technically obtains this exemption from the FDA. So, for example, there might be a laboratory somewhere in the country which specializes in a particular type of research. So the samples and the medicine will have to be sent to those places. The therapies will have to be sent to those labs, and those labs should follow good practices. And in order to be able to send the medicine across or the therapy across, it has to be certified by the FDA, and that certification is the IND, Investigational New Drug Process Certification. And the IND application developers must include animal study data and toxicity, which is the side effect that cause great harm, all data pertaining to that, the information on how it is manufactured, clinical protocols for studies to be conducted. In other words, study plans, what are the protocols to be followed, what data has to be tracked, data from any prior human research, information about the investigator who is going to conduct the investigation. All those information needs to be provided to the FDA. So once the FDA receives the IND application, it will start processing it. On receiving the IND application, FDA will react in one of the following ways. Either it will approve to begin the clinical trials, or it will hold or delay or stop the investigation. FDA can place a clinical hold for specific reasons, which includes that the participants are exposed to unreasonable or significant risk, investigators are not sufficiently qualified or not qualified at all, or underqualified, materials for the volunteer participants are misleading. These materials for volunteer participants means the information that is given to the volunteers who are participating in order for them to understand what is the trial, what side effects will be there, what are the risks involved. all those things are communicated to the participants. If materials given to the volunteer who are participating in the trial is misleading, then FDA can put a hold. The IND application does not include enough information about trial risks. It's also another reason why the FDA can put a hold. So those are the reasons why FDA can put a hold onto the IND application. A clinical hold is very rare. Instead, FDA often provides comments intended to improve the quality of a clinical trial. In most cases, if FDA is satisfied with that the trial meets federal standards, the applicant is allowed to proceed with the proposed study. The developer is responsible for informing the FDA review team about new protocols, as well as serious side effects seen during the trial. This information ensures that the team can monitor the trials carefully for signs of any problems. After the trial ends, the researchers must submit study reports. The process continues until the developer decides to end clinical trials or files the marketing applications. Before filing a marketing application, a developer must have adequate data from 2 large controlled clinical trials. So now let us dig a bit deeper into this part. Now here's the cost aspect. If the researcher or the developer has got to give sufficient information to the volunteer participants, it's not just going to be somebody types up a document and give it across. It will involve lawyers who are going to pan through the text. It will involve FDA going through all the non-disclosure agreements and whatever information is provided to the participants, and making sure that it is all right. If the FDA does not agree, they have to go back to the drawing board until they are able to come up with proper communication and they have enough volunteers who accept those conditions and enroll as participants in the study. So that's going to involve a certain amount of cost which can't be easily quantified. It could be a very, very simple communication and a low risk, in which case there is not going to be much iterations, and otherwise it's going to be a bit complex, and it can take a longer time. Now, animal study data and toxicity information that is included in the application, the FDA may want more information, so they may have to do more animal studies. So how much data is sufficient is what is determined by the FDA. Until such time, that information has to be provided in order to get the IND certification. So how many cycles of those tests they are going to do and data they are going to generate, it is all subjective depending on the therapy that they are working on. Manufacturing information also needs to be provided, and if there is anything in the manufacturing information that the FDA is not comfortable with, that has to be addressed and fixed. Such fixes could be simple fixes, or they could be complicated and involve a lot of money. So again, it's a variable cost. Clinical protocols or study plan for study have to be conducted, and anything in the clinical protocols are not according to FDA's satisfaction, they have to be addressed. And data from any prior human research, if available, has to be submitted. And if there is any deficiencies there, then FDA might require some extra information from the developer in order to proceed further. And how much will it cost to go get those extra information? What further studies have to be done? It's all subjective, and it may or may not be needed. So these are all the factors that continue to vary the cost of getting a FDA approval at this stage. Information about the investigator that is given to the FDA may be deficient, and the FDA may say, okay, I have all the information about you, but there are a few things that we are not comfortable with. We want you to be enhanced by so and so many factors. So we don't know what those things are going to be for any given developer. That's the reason why it's very difficult to put a dollar figure as a generic price for getting an FDA approval for a therapy or a drug. So once the IND designation is received, clinical research can get started. Clinical research refers to studies or trials that are done in people, and the trials follow a specific study plan called a protocol that is developed by the researcher or manufacturer. Genetic studies aim to improve the prediction of disorders by identifying and understanding how genes and illnesses may be related, and this may lead to development of tailor-made treatments based on patients' genetic makeup. So that's about an introduction to what it takes to get into the clinical research stage and what it means to have a IND designation. Now let's talk about various phases of clinical trials. The phase 1 consists of around 20 to around 100 healthy volunteers or people with the disease or conditions. The length of the study happens to be several months, and the main objective of this particular phase is to look at the safety and the dosage. And according to the FDA statistics, 70% of the drugs move from this phase to the next phase. So that means 30% of the drugs are likely to exit from the program at this stage. And when you go to phase 2, we have study participants of up to several hundred with the disease or condition, and the length of this study is much longer. It could be several months to all the way up to 2 years, depending on what disease is being targeted, what therapy is being used, and how it is administered. The objective here is to look at the efficacy and side effects. Approximately 33% of the drugs move from this phase to the next phase. So as opposed to phase 1, in phase 2, you have got almost 66% of the candidates dropping out from this stage by not being able to qualify beyond this stage. Then if we look at phase 3, we are looking at 300 to 3,000 volunteers who have the disease or condition. And the length of this study is 1 to 4 years. And objective is to look at the efficacy and monitoring side effects. Approximately 25 to 30% of drugs move to the next phase, which means almost 70 to 75% of the drugs do not go beyond this stage, which is phase 3. And in phase 4, study participants are almost several thousand volunteers who have the disease or condition. And the objective here is to look at the efficacy and monitoring side effects. So what we are here looking here is not only side effects, also whether this is a superior or equivalent to any other treatment for the same condition that is currently in the market. So this is also a stage where a candidate can drop out of the program. So in terms of FDA's process, once we have reached this stage, gone through clinical trials of 1, 2, and 3, and accumulated all the data, the drug developer must now include everything about the drug, including how it is manufactured, the methodology of the studies for preclinical trials, the preclinical trial data, the data from the various phases of the clinical tests, and put it all together and submit to the FDA in a new drug application form. So once FDA receives an NDA, the review team decides if it is complete. If it is incomplete, the review team can refuse to file the NDA or give guidance on how it is to be completed and send it back. If it is complete, the review team has 6 to 10 months to make a decision on whether to approve the drug or not. So this is exactly the entire process through which a drug has to go in order to reach the stage where it is now ready to be distributed to the market. So once the NDA designation is provided by the FDA by certifying the drug or therapy, the candidate or the drug or the therapy now enters into the post-market drug safety monitoring phase. And this is where FDA reviews reports of problems with prescription and over-the-counter drugs and can decide to add cautions to the dosage or usage information, as well as other measures for more serious issues. So even though we have thousands of volunteers in the phase 4 of the clinical trials, still there is a possibility that the trials have not covered the entire range of possibilities of patients. Therefore, once the drug is released into the market and it goes into the general population, there is a good likelihood that new side effects may be found, that it doesn't work well with some other drug somebody is consuming. We could also get information about the dosage being too strong or too weak from the physicians. So all that information has to be monitored by the manufacturer and sent back to the FDA on an ongoing basis, so that FDA can change the guidance and the labeling and everything. And this is how FDA controls and makes sure that there is good quality drugs, devices, and therapy available in the market, and to make sure that it is constantly updated and kept in a good level of safety for the general consumer. So that's what I have with regarding to the FDA approval process. Now I want to give you some statistics. So there is Tufts research report on FDA costs, and I have taken some numbers from there which I'm going to tell you. A total of 138 pivotal clinical trials provided the basis for approval of 59 new therapeutic agents by the FDA from 2015 to 2016. And when we look at the data from there, a median estimated cost of 19 million is what emerges for each drug. It's around 19 million. Estimated costs range from less than 5 million for trials without a control group for 3 orphan drugs with fewer than 15 patients each to 346.8 million for a non-inferiority trial with endpoints assessing clinical benefits. 26 of 138 trials, that is around 18.8%, were uncontrolled with a mean estimated cost of 13.5 million. Trials designed with placebo or active drug comparators had an estimated mean cost of 35.1 million. So in those trials, there will be a group which is given a placebo and another group at the same time being given the active drug in order to compare the outcome. Costs also varied by trial endpoint, treatment duration, patient enrollment, and therapeutic area. And also let us not forget that while doing clinical trials from phase 1 to phase 4, there could be a requirement to repeat certain phases in order to have the desired data and the desired information the way FDA requires it to be presented. So this is what I have with me regarding the FDA process. Now, we should contrast this with where our various CRISPR companies are with regard to their pipeline, and that will be a very interesting exercise. So what I would do next is I would pick up the pipelines from all our CRISPR companies, and then let us go through that with this knowledge in hand, and then try to determine how close we are to monetization. So that's all I have for you today, folks. I hope you enjoyed this. It's a bit of a heavy topic, but we have to go through this in order to be able to have any sense of what any of our CRISPR companies worth. Thanks for watching this entire video, and if you're here for the first time, please consider subscribing to this channel and be part of our CRISPR community. And thanks for all the loyal subscribers, and I wish you all a happy weekend, and I'll catch up with you tomorrow, maybe with a shorter video. Bye for now.